Ya Ali Madad. Today we're going to be discussing the Quran and the Dua, and specifically with reference to understanding why we have the Dua using the specific Quranic ayats that it does. So I think most people are familiar with the fact that we used to have an old Dua that was not in Arabic, but that Dua was, from what I understand, limited to only specific parts of the world. And sometime in the late 50s, the Imam decided to introduce a new form of dua that was in Arabic. And there was at the very least one or two reasons for that change. And that was that there was a change in demographics in the Ismaili world. There was a change in the populations and the languages of the Ismaili world. And there was a need for uniformity in how Ismailis prayed across the world. And the Imam decided that that language should be the language of the Quran, which is Arabic. But then we have to ask ourselves, to begin with, one or two questions. If the Quran itself is that important, then surely the words of the Quran are enough. Why would we not just have the recitation of the Quranic ayats itself with nothing else required? Why do we need any more than just the words of the Quran? On the other hand, we can ask, why do we need to recite the Quran at all? For Ismailis, the words of the Imam are all we ever need. And if the Imam decided to compose a dua that just had words that he decided on that had no reference to the Quran at all, that is enough for any Ismaili. But we have a mixture of these two things. So today's journey is to try and understand as much as we can some of the wisdom behind the Imam's decision. So, one of the key things is that the Quran itself has 6,666 verses. We certainly don't have anywhere near that number of verses in our dua. So, why did Imam choose the specific verses that he did? So, one of the concepts that we need to focus on is the concept of ta'wil, the concept of interpretation, which obviously is the role of the Imam. The Quran itself is an extremely hard book to understand due to the hidden meanings, due to the language used, due to the contradictory messages between certain verses. But we also know from the writings of our peers and dais that certain parts of the Quran are so comprehensive that they contain the essence of the Quran. Now, if you mix those fundamental verses with parts that explain those fundamental verses, then you have a dua that effectively contains the best of both. It expresses the fundamental verses, but it also has an explanation around those verses. Now, obviously, we cannot possibly cover the whole of the dua in a session like this, but we're going to focus within this first lecture on the first three parts of dua. But we have to begin the journey by understanding that the dua itself is very, very hard to understand in its reality unless we understand the significance behind why the Imam has chosen the verses that he has. So let's look at the first part of dua. And the first part of dua, which we're all familiar with, begins Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And for every Muslim, they will know that that is the beginning of the Quran, which is the Surah Al-Fatiha. And this surah is also known as Surah Al-Shifa, or the verse of healing. So why would this be the first verse that we recite within our dua, or the first few words that we recite within our dua? So let's try and look at what the Quran itself says about the Surah Al-Fatiha. And if we look at 43:4, 43:4 says, "And verily it, the Quran, is in the Kitab with us, sublime and wise." So the Quran itself is saying that the entire meaning of the Quran is in the Kitab, or the Surah Al-Fatiha. The entire meaning of the Quran is in the Kitab, or the Surah Al-Fatiha. So when we begin our dua, when we say the first few bits of the first part of dua, in those very first few seconds, we have effectively recited the essence of the entire Quran. So let's now look at what the Prophet himself has said about um, the Quran. The Holy Prophet is explained in the Hadith. Ali is with the Quran, and the Quran is with Ali, and they are inseparable until they come to me at the pond of Kawthar. Ali is with the Quran, and the Quran is with Ali. That's pretty categorical, that the essence of the Quran is with Ali. Or another way of looking at it is that the Quran and Ali are one and the same. So if we put the two things that we have just gone through, that the essence of the Quran is in Ali and the essence of the Quran is in Surah Al-Fatiha, then the Surah Al-Fatiha is also in Ali. And if we take it one step further, that we can say it as the Kitab is in Ali, or the Kitab is Ali. But what else do we know about this surah? Well, our Imams and peers have explained that the Surah Al-Fatiha is itself contained in the word Bismillah. The Surah Al-Fatiha is itself contained in the word Bismillah. So when we begin each part of our dua with this one word, then this word, the word Bismillah, contains in it the Surah Al-Fatiha, contains in it the Kitab. And since the Kitab, or the Surah Al-Fatiha, is itself the essence of the Quran, then by reciting that one word Bismillah, we are reciting the essence of the Quran. So at the start of every part of our dua, we are beginning by reciting the essence of the Quran. But we can take it one step further. We have also said, with the Prophet's own words, that the Quran is with Ali, that the Surah Al-Fatiha is Ali, that the Kitab is Ali. So on that basis, when we're reciting that word Bismillah, which is a representation of Kitab and Surah Al-Fatiha, we are also acknowledging Hazrat Ali every time we recite that. So now let's look further at what Maulana Ali himself has said. So Hazrat Ali has said that the word Bismillah is contained in the letter Ba. And the letter Ba in Arabic is like the shape of a ship with a dot underneath it, the shape of a boat with a dot underneath it. And he goes even further. And he says that the Ba is contained in the dot under the Ba. So let's recap that. Hazrat Ali has said that the word Bismillah is contained in the letter Ba, and that the letter Ba is contained under the dot of the Ba. And Hazrat Ali is quoted as saying, "Know that all the secrets in the divine books are in the Quran. All that is in the Quran is in the Surah Al-Fatiha. All that is in the Fatiha is in Bismillah. All that is in the Bismillah is in the ba. All that is in the ba is the dot under the ba. And I am the dot under the ba. Hazrat Ali is talking about himself. I am the dot under the ba. So that, if we take all of that and try and string all those things together, we already have concluded that the essence of the Quran is in the Fatiha, which is in the word Bismillah. And we have said that the essence of the Quran that is contained in the Fatiha and the Bismillah is also contained in the Ba. And the essence of the Ba is under the dot. And that dot is Ali himself. The essence of the entire Quran, again, looking at it through these contexts, is also again in Hazrat Ali. So one thing that we need to look at is how can we understand the use of the dot under the bar as being the essence of the Quran? Well, if you look at how traditionally we write, you write with a dot being extended out. So imagine taking a quill in those days with some ink and placing that quill on a paper. That creates a dot. And you stretch the dot out to create letters, and you stretch the letters out to create words, and you stretch those out to create sentences and paragraphs and books. And that is one way of understanding how the dot contains the essence of the Quran, and that dot being Hazrat Ali. And Hazrat Ali is also, there's a famous story of Hazrat Ali saying that if he was asked to explain the meaning of Fatiha, then it would take 70 camels worth of books, enough books for 70 camels to carry, just for the explanation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Well, if the Surah Al-Fatiha contains the essence of the Quran, then obviously those 70 loads, 70 camels worth of books is an explanation of the entire Quran. And that is the power of ta'wil, is that the Imam being the essence of the Quran, it's not just about regurgitating words. It's not just about replaying what is in the physical writing. It is about extracting meaning out of those words. It is about extracting the hidden meaning of those words. And that's the real power of ta'wil. It is like a layer, it is like the layers of an onion. When you gradually peel one layer of an onion, there are more layers and more layers and more layers until you get to the essence inside. And every layer gives you a fresher and fresher and fresher part of that onion until you get to the core essence. So just imagine how much explanation there could be in that word Bismillah, how the Imam could extend that one word or that one surah of Fatiha into so many books, thousands of books that those camels would need to carry, and what information that would contain. That is the whole meaning behind Ta'wil, and that is the level of meaning, hidden meaning that is in the Quran, that is in every verse of the Quran. So we've not really even started explaining the whole dua yet, and already we have come to the conclusion that just in this first part of our dua, and just in this first word of the first part of dua, we already have the understanding that we are reciting the essence of the Quran. But that this requires the concept of ta'wil. It requires the concept of hidden and deeper meanings, not just dictionary meanings. And that is true throughout the Quran. The Quran is very hard to understand if you purely look at dictionary meanings. So let's now move on to the second part of dua, where there are actually two verses. And the first of those is 459, which says, O you who believe, obey Allah and obey the Messenger and those in authority from amongst you. Now, one of the difficulties of the Quran is understanding how to interpret each verse, especially when the words make no sense in our context. Now, had it been easy to understand the Quran, had it been obvious how to understand and interpret the Quran, then we would have no division in Islam. We would have had no need for the Shia Sunni split. We would all have understood the message in the same way. But we know that is not so. Even within the Sunni Shia split, there are other splits, there are other schools of thought. There are several different streams of followers in each of the major streams. So let's look at what this verse is actually telling us. If we look at the first two parts in that verse, which says, obey Allah and obey the Prophet, that's probably accepted by everyone in relatively the same way. It is about obeying Allah and obeying the Prophet, which every Muslim accepts. But it's the third part, it is the ulul amr that causes the difficulty. Now, in general, the ulul amr refers to those in authority amongst you, but that could refer to so many things. It could be a king, it could be a local leader, it could be somebody within your household whom you consider to be an authority. How do we accept, how do we understand what kind of authority the Quran is referring to? Now, this is one of those verses that has caused so much difference of opinion. And it is one of those verses that Shias will use to prove their point, and others will say, but this means any general leadership. So we have to use logic to analyze what these words mean. So we have here a reference to Allah and the Prophet. And if you look from a religious point of view, both of those things relate to each other. They are both, in terms of their purpose and their position within humanity, they are of some level of equivalence. So you can say they're of the same sort of category. Obeying Allah, obeying the Prophet. If you obey one, you obey the other. And these are the highest levels of obedience. So when you're asked to obey Allah and the Prophet, you're being asked to obey the highest levels of authority that are known to you. But then we would have to ask the question, if that sentence is referring to two things which are of the highest level, then how can the third thing that we're being asked to obey not be of an equivalent level? Why would God mix obedience to something that is of a highest authority with something that is very common in humanity? Just using logic, it doesn't make sense that these three things, two of them would be of a very high level and the third would be of a very low level. So on that basis, we can quite logically say that that third thing must also be of a similar category of obedience. So we have obeying Allah and obeying the Messenger and obeying somebody in authority who is of an equivalent level. So then we have to ask, how do we then understand what that equivalent level is? So then the Imam, in the second part of that part of dua, gives us another reference. And that reference is Surah 36, Ayah 12. And we have put everything in an Imami Mubin. We have put everything in an Imami Mubin. I've deliberately left the last two words in Arabic because of the fact that they are translated in so many different ways. Now, if you look at English translations of the Quran or Urdu translations or Gujarati translations, you will see these words translated in a multitude of ways. And indeed, the word imam can in Arabic have many meanings. But again, we have to use logic to analyze what the context here is and what meaning makes sense in this context. So one of the things that is really, really important in Arabic is actually understanding Arabic grammar. I'm no expert in Arabic, but these are things that I've picked up over the years. And one of the people that I was learning snippets of the Quran from explained to me about understanding the word mubin here. So Arabic is a really, really complex grammar, and there are lots of interrelationships between words. And the word mubin is actually related or comes from a word which is bayan. Bayan is actually another name for the Quran. It is actually the word that means to explain. And mubin is the one who explains. So the word mubin can actually have multiple meanings. It means in general contexts manifest or present, but in a more esoteric sense, it also refers to the one who does bayan, the one who explains. So then let's look at what this actual part of the verse is telling us. There are two things in here. It's talking about the manifest imam, imami mubin, and the word imam has been translated as a register, as a book, as an imam, as a guide, as I said, a multitude of things. But it also says that there is everything in that imami mubin. And that's the key thing we have to use our logic for, is there is everything in the imami mubin. So let's first ask ourselves, do we know of anything in the physical world which contains everything? And I think we can safely say that I would suspect none of us know of anything physical that contains everything. So we can logically exclude the fact that this is talking about something physical. But could this then be the physical Quran that is talking about? That the physical Quran which contains the knowledge of everything? Because that is how some translations have referred to it. But if you look at the Quran and you look at it as most Muslims read it, which is as a pure literal meaning, then how can a limited set of words contain the knowledge of everything? Does the physical Quran tell us about all the current sciences that we know? Does it tell us about, how the universe began? Does it tell us about how the brain works? No. That limited set of words on its own cannot tell us everything that we know as humanity over our history. So let's go back to our first discussion on Surah Al-Fatiha. What did we conclude about Surah Al-Fatiha? We said that the essence of the Quran, i.e. the hidden meanings of the Quran, is in the Fatiha. And we said that the Fatiha is in the word Bismillah. And the word Bismillah is in the dot of the Bismillah. And what was our conclusion behind the dot? That the dot was Hazrat Ali himself, i.e. the essence of the Quran, the fundamental meaning of the Quran is in the Imam of the time, is in Hazrat Ali. So with logic, we can actually conclude that the everything that's being referred to here is referring to the knowledge within the Imam, the knowledge within the manifest Imam, Imami Mubin. And that goes back to that Arabic linkage of what Mubin is about. Mubin is the one who does bayan, as well as being manifest. So this is saying that it is the line of the Imams from the time of the Prophet that contain the essence of the knowledge of everything. And that is again referring to the ta'wil of the Quran. It is not about the literal words of the Quran. It is about being able to get the hidden meaning of the Quran. And again, go back to the story of Hazrat Ali. Remember, just with the word Bismillah or just with the Surah Al-Fatiha, Maulana Ali said he would be able to write enough books for 70 camels worth of load. And that is on just a few words of the Quran. So imagine how much he would write if he had to explain the entire Quran using ta'wil. That is the meaning of everything being in the Imam Mubin. The essence of everything, the knowledge of everything is in the Imam Mubin. So far we've only covered 3 verses, but just in these 3 verses, I think we can slowly begin to see, or at least try and understand, one aspect of the Imam's choice. And that is about clearly setting out the Ismaili position of the understanding of the Quran and the understanding of the Imamat within that context. That every time we recite these, we are reaffirming the key position of the Imam as the holder of the knowledge of the essence of the Quran. And that is a fundamental principle of the Ismaili faith ever since the time of Hazrat Ali. And the Imam reminds us of that principle every time we recite the dua. So let's now finally look at part 3. So in part 3, which has the reference of 567, it says, O Messenger, deliver what has been revealed to you from your Lord. And if you do not do it, then you have not delivered his message, and Allah will protect you from the people. Surely Allah will not guide the unbelieving people. Now this seems like quite a telling off. The Prophet had been delivering the Quran. At the point when this ayat was revealed, the Prophet actually had revealed a substantial part of the Quran as we know it. And in order to understand that, remember that the Quran that we have today is not in a chronological order. It is not time-wise. The chronological order of those verses is very different. And that this revelation was not at the start of the Quranic revelation. Now, had it been one of the first things that was revealed to the Prophet, had it been within the first few months of his journey, then yes, we could understand God reprimanding the Prophet and saying, make sure you deliver my message. But that just was not the case. This verse was revealed towards the end of the journey. A large part of the Quran had already been revealed. So what was the indication about not delivering the message? So this verse was actually revealed on the Prophet's final Hajj at a place called Qum. And so what was the significance of this command at such a late stage in the journey? So for this, we need to go back into history, which is well documented, and understand what actually happened at the event of Qum. So it was clear that Hazrat Ali was a favorite of the Prophet, but it is also historically clear that there was great opposition around him. People were not very happy with Ali being the favorite of the Prophet. So after the revelation of this particular verse, 567, the Prophet on his way back on the final Hajj stopped at a pond in Qum, and Gadir means pond, and he made the famous declaration of, He whose Mawla I am, Ali is his Mawla. He whose Mawla I am, Ali is his Mawla. And he also then said, O Allah, be a friend to the friend of Ali, and the enemy of Ali. O Allah, be a friend to the friend of Ali, and be an enemy of the enemy of Ali. So we have to ask why the Prophet decided to make the stop at Gadirikum and express these things about Hazrat Ali, and whether this was the direct result of the revelation of 567. Ismailis, in fact, all Shias believe that it was related to that verse, and that the message of God spoke that that the message in that ayat that was revealed was related to the declaration of Maulana Ali as the Mawla of the community. And that is why at Gadirikum the Prophet had to be so categoric about the declaration of Ali. And this is why that verse referred to the revelation being left incomplete had this message not been made. So then let's look at what happened after this event. After this event, there was another revelation, which is 567. Sorry, 5.3. So after 567, we had Gadirikum, and after Gadirikum, soon after, there was the revelation of 5.3. And 5.3 says, "This day have those who reject faith given up all hope of your religion. Yet fear them not, but fear me. This day have I perfected your religion for you, completed my favor upon you, and have chosen for you Islam as your religion. This day have I perfected your religion for you, completed my favor upon you, and have chosen for you Islam as your religion." Now, we could claim that there is no connection between these events. The revelation of 567, the event of Gadirikum, and the revelation of 5.3. But if we look at these things objectively, surely we cannot discount that these events seem too closely related. One, they were in succession to each other. What they're saying seem to be related. Now, the Shias firmly believe that the message of the Quran would have been incomplete without the declaration of Imamat, without the declaration of Hazrat Ali, and hence that is the reference to the faith not being perfect. The perfection is not related to the physical Quran. The perfection is related to the combination of both the physical Quran and the one who guides and interprets the Quran. Remember again that famous hadith of the Prophet, "I'm leaving behind me two weighty things, the Quran and my itrat, my progeny." So it was only when the Prophet had formally declared Maulana Ali's position did the message of Islam become perfect. So let's summarize what we have within these first three parts. If we looked at those verses independently, they would apparently seem disconnected. But within these first three parts of dua, with the choice of the verses that Imam has, as far as we can understand, the Imam has defined the very essence of Imamat. He has defined the historical context of the Imamat. He has defined the declaration of Imamat within the history of Islam. And as you can see, just reading those verses is not enough. We need to have context around the verses. We need to have history around the verses, and we need to understand ta'wil as explained by our peers and ayes. And if we study the dua as a complex book that is the essence of the Quran, analyzing every word and how it relates to other parts of dua and the Quran and our history, we will find that just as with the Fatiha, the dua of 6 verses contains books and books and books worth of meaning, layer after layer after layer after layer. And the deeper we will search, the more we will find. And the more we will understand the essence and gain clarity on the role and position of the Imam. That is the fundamental part of the Ismaili faith, is understanding the position and the role of the Imam, because without it, nothing else makes sense, and actually nothing else matters. It is only when we are clear on the role and position of the Imam that everything else fits into place. Thank you, and Ya Ali Madad.